I am Daniel Likis, and welcome to Geography 101. Geography 101 is all about the places that I visited from Europe, Caribbean, North America, South America, Asia, and a lot more. And today, I have my special guest. He's the author of several books, no other than Mr. Dylan West.
Hey Daniel, how you doing, man?
I'm fabulous like you, Mr. Dylan, and welcome to Geography 101.
Well, thank you. It's a good place to be.
Yes, and can you please introduce yourself more?
Awesome. Okay, so I am the author of Scribe's Descent and Emulsipation. These are Christian-based young adult sci-fi and fantasy novels that take place in a completely different universe. So unfortunately, all of our geography we're talking about today, the people in that universe don't know about it because they don't have Earth where they come from. They have different planets with their own geography, and I get the privilege of mapping all that out for them. And wouldn't you know it, knowing our planet in a intimate fashion really helps with that. Other things that you should know about me: I was in the Navy as a nuclear operator back in 1999 to 2007. In '05, I went around the world on a cruise on the USS Carl Vinson. I was the load dispatcher on the carrier, which means that I ran the electrical distribution, the whole electric plant for the aircraft carrier. And when we went on that around the world tour, we got to stop in ports all over the world. And that's what I would like to share with you tonight.
Yes, which part of the globe where we can start?
Okay. Well, I can start with an overview of the path that we took, and then we can dial into some of the points of interest if you'd like.
Definitely sounds interesting, Mr. Dylan, and let's go ahead.
Okay. So it started in the Washington State. We were stationed in Bremerton, Washington. And for those who aren't familiar, that's really close to Seattle. And you've heard the movie Sleepless in Seattle, right?
Yes.
That may not be true of the average person in Seattle, but let me tell you, if you were working as a sailor in the Navy in that area, you are probably sleepless because you're probably up standing watch and doing maintenance and pursuing your qualifications for whatever watch stations that you're trying to to achieve on that ship or that submarine. So yes, we were very sleepless. I can attest to that. And so we would normally do workups between the Seattle area, the Puget Sound, and we would go down the West Coast, and then we would pick up an air wing down in San Diego. We would, make circles in the Pacific Ocean and go back home to the Puget Sound. That's what we normally do. But, it came a time where we needed to refuel our two onboard nuclear power plants. That's right. We didn't have
Wow.
just one power plant on the nuclear powered aircraft carrier. We had two of them. And so that means we had two nuclear reactors to refuel. And of course, we're talking about uranium 235 fuel rods. After 20 something years of operating those, you got to replace them with new fuel rods. And you can't just go to a gas station, right?
Definitely.
You've got to go to a shipyard that is equipped to handle such a thing. And it just so happens that we did not have that in the shipyard we were at. We had to go around the world to where I live now, which is in Virginia. Specifically, we had to go to a shipyard in Newport News, Virginia. And so to get there, we chose to do an around the world tour, starting from the Puget Sound, crossing the the Pacific. And once we got to the far eastern Asia area, we stopped off first in Guam. And I've got some adventures to share with you there. Then went south and through the different islands in Indonesia, specifically through the Strait of Malacca, which runs between Malaysia and Indonesia. And we stopped off in Singapore there. That's another point of interest we'll talk a little bit about. Went up through the Bay of Bengal and through the Indian Ocean, sailed north into the Persian Gulf. And to get there, we had to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So we're talking about a major oil shipping lane, cut circles in the Persian Gulf for, gosh, I think about 3 or 4 months in the middle of summer. Yes, that is as hot as you think it is. And I will tell you more about that set of ports because we stopped at the United Arab Emirates twice. We stopped at Bahrain once during that. And then we came out of the Persian Gulf, back out through the Straits of Hormuz, down through the Gulf of Aden, up through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. I know I'm throwing a lot of probably unusual geography terms that our listeners may not be familiar with, but if you pull up a world map and you look at this, you will probably see all these things. But we go through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb that goes up into the Red Sea. And I do mean the same Red Sea we all heard about in Sunday school where Moses parted it and, you know, they crossed on dry land. Like we got to sail across that body of water. So that was pretty awesome. Went up through the canal and out into the Mediterranean. And that's where we got to stop at an island called Rhodes, Greece, which is just off the coast of Turkey. That's probably my favorite port. And we'll probably camp out there a little bit and talk at length about that one.
Yes.
Just giving you the overview here. So after we stopped at Rhodes, Greece, then we kept proceeding west until we came out through the Strait of Gibraltar, which is between Spain and Morocco. And we came out through there into the Atlantic, swung north to Lisbon, Portugal, for another port call before we crossed the Atlantic and came back to the U.S. in Virginia. So
what a journey.
That is the overview.
Yes. So which country that we're going to talk about first?
Well, we could go in order if you'd like.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, awesome. So like I said, the first port that we landed in is Guam. And so we're talking about beautiful tropical waters. If you've seen video or photos of Hawaii, Guam looks pretty much like that. Only Guam is a lot smaller. And so we have a Navy base there. So, it's not a dangerous place to stop. There's lots of friendly people. You know, they speak English there. And my friends in the reactor department knew people at a local church. And so I got to go to a really great church right there in Guam. One of the things we did, one of my fellow Christians on my ship, on the Carl Vinson, he recently became a Christian and he asked me to baptize him. And so we didn't do it in a baptismal pool at a church. We went into the tropical waters right there on the beach of Guam, and I got to baptize him in that.
Wow. Amen.
Awesome.
Yes. Awesome. So that's the memorable experience in Guam. So Guam is
It is a territory, I believe. I believe we consider it a territory. Yep.
Oh, okay. So in the mainland, do you have the same culture or the same influence by the Americans?
I saw quite a bit of influence, but of course there's, they've got local culture there too. I can't speak as a really solid expert in Guam because we really only stayed there for about 3 or 4 days. There are other Navy personnel who've been stationed there for years, and they would know way more than I would, right? But from the limited exposure I saw, they were very friendly to the U.S. they liked the base that was there. You know, nobody told us when we got off of the ship, hey, be careful. Like some of the ports. And some of the ports I'm going to share, you know, I'm going to talk about, yeah, that we had that talk, right?
Yes. If you describe Guam, what is it?
Oh, just tropical, beautiful, laid back, you know, and in warm, you know, it was decently warm. I will say that. But yeah,
Yes, warm.
and
They think,
it's a relatively small island.
yes, they think in the future, because of climate change, Guam will be disappear.
Oh, you know what? That's a great question. I would have to look at a topographical map to see where the surface of Guam lies in relation to the sea level. I can't. I don't remember it remember it being especially mountainous. I think that, but I don't remember it being super, you know, low either.
Yes.
In fact, I don't know that I could really speak to that kind of thing for most of my port calls, except for maybe one. I could maybe talk a little bit about in more in depth on roads grease, but the others not so much.
So in your book, do you have the same Guam in your geography?
So while I don't have an island named Guam, I do have other tropical islands on the planet Daishan, which is where both scribe's descent and emulsipation take place.
Oh, sounds interesting. Is it the same climate, the same aura of the island?
Yes, actually, for the most part, it is. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be awesome. What will be our next stop, Mr.
Okay,
Dylan?
so then from Guam, we continued going westward in the Pacific Ocean until we passed the Philippines. And, you know, originally we were supposed to stop in Japan, but
Yes.
actually we were also supposed to stop in Hawaii. But you know what kept us from going there? It still irks me to this day. We all had to take an anthrax shot because
Oh, okay.
anthrax was still, you know, a pretty big threat back in, I think, 2005.
Yes.
So we all had to take that shot, and as a result, they wouldn't let. At least this is the reason they gave us, right?
Yeah.
Then we weren't allowed to stop at Hawaii. We were all bummed, and then we also couldn't go to Japan, but we did stop at Singapore. And so, for those who are unfamiliar, if you look at the Malay Peninsula that drops down like a really skinny, almost like a cattail dropping down, you know, from Southeast Asia. That peninsula has Malaysia, but at the very tip of it, it's got a tiny country called Singapore. And so we got to stop there for another port call. And by the way, all these port calls, they generally lasted about 4 days. But if you were like me and you were in a reactor department, you didn't get to go out for the entire 4 days. You really got to go out for maybe 2 or 3 of the days
Yes.
because somebody had to stay behind on the carrier to operate the nuclear power plant in the engine room, right? Because we kept all that stuff running. We didn't shut everything down, right? We had to be ready to steam off, you know, if we had to very quickly. So yeah, so 2 or 3 days tops is, you know, each one of these ports. So yeah, we stopped at Singapore, and there was a lot of Chinese there.
Yes.
In fact, the Mandarin way to say Singapore is Xinjiapur.
Yes.
And at that time, I was actively studying Mandarin Chinese. And
Ah,
so
that's
I
awesome.
got to go to a Chinese speaking church there. I don't remember the name of it, but I do remember this. I think you'll like this detail. So
Yes.
at this point, I had been studying Chinese on my own with books and CDs, and I think I went to a few Chinese churches back in the Seattle area for about a year or two. So I'd been really practicing it. So when we go to this Chinese church, they welcomed all of us Christians from the carrier, and I told them, hey, I speak some Chinese, and they had me come up and give testimony. And so for 5 minutes, I stood before the congregation and spoke in nothing but Mandarin Chinese, and they just erupted in applause. And I was like, oh, well, nali, nali, which literally means where, but that's the way of saying, oh, thank you. Or, like, or it's the response to, oh, that's so awesome. Oh, not really, that's what that means. And so when we got back to the ship, my other brothers who knew I'd been studying Chinese for all this time, they looked at me and they said, whoa, we knew you were studying this stuff, but it wasn't real to us until we saw you do that.
Yes.
Now they saw me with flashcards. I would be standing in line for chow, waiting for the galley with these Chinese flashcards. They saw me doing that all the time and memorizing Bible verses in Chinese that I had written in a little notepad that I kept in my pocket. I'd always pull it out and recite these verses in Chinese.
Wow, is that awesome?
Yeah. Oh, and another thing you should know about all of these ports is before we even left the United States, I bought 2,000 gospel booklets, these little comic book formats, and they were all the very same, what we called a gospel tract. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but the brand of this was from Chick, JTC, and this one was called This Was Your Life.
Okay.
This was it's still a very, very popular gospel booklet. If you do a Google search, I'm sure you'll see it, right away. And it's been translated in many languages. And so I got 10 different languages worth and like 100 or 200 copies of each of these. And I filled up a backpack, and every port we went to, I handed out dozens of these to my Christian friends who came with me, and we handed out these booklets, the language according to the port that we went to. And so in Singapore, I knew there was Chinese, so we handed out a bunch of English and a bunch of Chinese tracts.
Yes.
Even though, especially when we got to the Middle East, our captain expressly forbade us from doing this, or from like proselytizing, preaching the gospel. They didn't want you to go and do this with the locals. We did it, but we were very careful and very discreet about it. And we didn't get in trouble and, didn't cause a ruckus,
So if you describe Singapore, what is it?
Okay, so a lot of the other sailors ended up going to Buddhist temples. Like that was a big tourist attraction there. But for me, I went to a church there and I just visited other places in town. I didn't do heavy sightseeing and tried to go off to Buddhist temples and all that stuff. But, there was also kind of limited time. You only had about 2 days, maybe 3. And there was this lingering fear that you had to get back to the ship before it pulled out of port. You did not want to be the one guy that everybody else was waiting on. Right? Because there are 5,000 people on this carrier.
Yes.
And they all need to leave there on time. You will get in trouble with the captain and the executive officer. If you're the darned guy, right?
Yes, definitely.
And you might even get left. I don't know. I don't know if that's ever happened. Probably ask some of my friends. I just know I didn't. I never came back late because I was terrified of doing so,
Be punctual that time. Yes.
So the next port,
yes.
After that, we went northwest through the Strait of Malacca. So that is between the island of, I think that's Sumatra, the really big island of Indonesia, that and Malaysia, up through the Bay of Bengal. And we swept past India. Oh, I wanted to go to India, but that just wasn't on the itinerary, right?
Yes.
But we went up through the Strait of Hormuz, which lies between Oman and Iran, and into the Persian Gulf. At least that's the term most people know it as. But I think in recent times, it's been renamed to the Northern Arabian Sea.
Oh, yes.
But nobody really calls it that. Everybody knows it still as the Persian Gulf, so that's what I'll refer to it as. Now, there were several ports that we stopped at here. One of them we stopped at twice. Okay, so we stopped at Bahrain once. So you're probably familiar with the name Bahrain, right?
Yes.
It is part of, or it's right up, snugged up against the Saudi Arabia. But the difference, there's a crucial difference. It's not technically Saudi Arabia. It's just neighboring it, right? I believe,
Yes.
has a different government. And that's important because we were not allowed to leave Bahrain into Saudi Arabia. We were strictly told, do not try to do that, right? Because the Bahrain government was friendly toward us, and that they allowed our carrier to stop at their port, but we
Yes.
were not welcomed in Saudi Arabia, at least at that time. I don't know if that's changed since then.
What can you say about Bahrain?
Okay, first of all, I had been starting to study Arabic on the trip over there.
Yes.
And I think a little bit before we went on deployment, because I knew, like, okay, I want to be able to practice a little bit of Arabic when we get there. So I think I'd been practicing for about a year at this point. And so we got to Bahrain, and I looked it up. Bahrain comes from the Arabic word bahr, and bahr means sea. Now, in Arabic, there's this very interesting grammatical thing they do called a dual. That's a dual, or two, like pairs. And so, you know how, like, in English, we have the concept of a plural, where you say one hand, two hands. But one door, two doors. So we stick an S on the end of a word, and that makes it plural, right? And in some cases, we have an irregular. Sometimes we'll say, like, one woman, two women, right? So it's not, you don't always stick an S on the end. In Arabic, you have the same concept of plural, but you also have a separate ending for a pair of something. So, for instance, you wouldn't say for two C's, you would say Bahrain. The ain ending means two.
Yes.
So because Bahrain is between two C's, I guess that's the idea. That's why they named it that.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, and we handed out gospel booklets in Arabic there. And I don't remember a ton about that port because the other port we went to nearby stands out a lot more brightly in my mind. And that was the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. And now the term emirate means like a princedom. So that's probably the best translation I can give you. So the UAE, it's like 7 different, almost like states that are united, kind of like the United States has 50 that are joined together, right?
Yes.
We stopped in Jebel Ali, which I think translates to high mountain, and that's really close to Dubai. And so we stopped in Dubai before the Burj Khalifa was built. Are you familiar with the Burj Khalifa?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, we did. This was in 2005, and I don't think the Burj Khalifa was built until a few years later. I'd have to look it up. But they were building the indoor snow skiing resort, although they didn't have it finished. So I think we were talking about it. And we're like, oh man, we barely missed it because I think they finished that later that year or something.
Yes.
So yeah, if that sounds wild to you that you could go snow skiing in the Middle East, that's what they were doing. They built an indoor snow resort there. Oh yes, very hot, and we were there in the middle of summer. So I still remembered leaving the ship and just roasting, and there's something else too. There's the sand. When we were in the middle of the Persian Gulf, which we were like dozens of miles from shore, you would think that you wouldn't have sand everywhere. Oh no. Even 20, 30, 40 miles from land, that sand gets entrained in the prevailing winds, and it will just fly through the air for miles and miles and miles off the coast. And it'll just go all over the atmosphere, including into the ductworks, the air intakes of the ship. And that sand would end up in our engine rooms. And it would end up on our bunks. So I want you to imagine with me waking up in the morning in this tiny coffin bunk, this tiny bunk bed that you sleep in on the ship, and you've got this wool blanket, and when you lift that blanket up comes a big layer of sand. You have to knock all the sand off of you before you can even get out of bed. And if you forgot to turn your boots sideways or downwards, then you've got to knock the sand that collected out of your boots overnight.
Oh my goodness.
No, I'm not talking about like bucket loads, maybe a thin layer of it. No, we did try to cover all of our vent ducts in cheesecloth, this thin kind of filmy substance to keep the sand out of our our electrical gear and all these things. But, sometimes it's still found a way through. Man, I spent that whole summer cleaning sand out of everywhere on the ship. It was pretty crazy. But yeah, UAE, Dubai, it was pretty awesome. And the thing that made it really awesome was the church that was there. This is a recurring theme. You're going to see that a lot here. There was a really awesome church, and it spoke many languages because the UAE is this, we throw around the term boiling pot about America of the different cultures and languages. Well, that's very true in the UAE, in this condensed small area. And so there was there was this big building for the church, and they had I think at least a dozen different church services for people of different ethnicities and languages. They had a Chinese service, and they had an English one. They had one that they spoke just Arabic and all that. And I think I went to the the English speaking one because there were people I wanted to meet there. But I remembered somebody at the church inviting me and our friends to go sandboarding with them.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean by sandboarding?
Yes.
So normally you go out snowboarding, right? On a snowy hill. Well, here they don't have snow outside, and unless you went to the indoor snow skiing slope, right? But you go out to the dunes, and first of all, we got into these dune buggies. And I still remember when we were pulling off of the dirt road to go up on the actual dunes, the very first thing we did was let out some of our air pressure from all the tires. We didn't flatten them, but just let out a little bit to raise the surface area of the tires to get better traction. And then we dune buggied across, I think, about 10 or 20 solid miles of dunes at 40 miles per hour. And we were getting air. I mean, we weren't going real slow and casual. We were cruising. I remember just boosting off the ends of these dunes, and flying for at least, 5, 10, 15 feet in the air. I have no idea how these people knew where they were going, but they had the spot that they always went to. And when we got there, we got to do some sandboarding in the evening and even at night. And I still remember just going down this 40-foot tall dune on a sandboard. And I think I did okay. I didn't crash and hurt myself or anything, but it was a different experience, let me tell you. And that was a lot of fun. I'll never forget that. And also got to hand out a lot of gospel booklets in the local malls. I still remember this family, and I think that they're all, bundled up, with the head scarves and the burqas and all that, or at least the females were, if I remember correctly. And there was this little kid, I think about 4 years old, might have been 2 or 3 of them, that I handed this gospel booklet. Now, you got to know these booklets, they're really cute art, really great comics. And it was in Arabic so they could understand it. I handed it to these kids, and their parents were right there. I handed them a copy too. And when the kids, they were really into it. And the parents, when they saw that it was Christian based, they didn't yell at me or anything, but they didn't want their kids reading it. And I still remember the look on the kids' faces when the parents were prying those booklets from their hands.
Wow.
Right in front of us. And I was just like, wow. Oh, that's
awesome.
That's not good. But I hope that these kids remember this and they seek out more about the gospel of Jesus later.
Definitely.
That this memory tells them, hey, there's something out there that you should look into, right? That's my prayer for them.
Yes,
Uh,
definitely. So, Mr. Dylan, what is your religion? I'm curious about it.
Oh, okay. So I'm a Christian, right?
Yeah.
And as far as denomination, I grew up Southern Baptist, but then I started going to non-denominational churches, and I've been to Pentecostal churches, where it's very charismatic and you speaking in tongues and that kind of thing. No snake charming, though, none of that. um,
Okay.
and I've gone to Chinese churches, and those are the same kind of churches that you're used to. I think some of them were Presbyterian, some of them were Baptist, some of them were non-denominational, but they spoke nothing but Chinese, and we sang hymns in Chinese. So
Oh,
that really helped me to become reasonably proficient in the language. And for any listeners out there who are trying to learn a foreign language right now, if the language you're trying to learn has a church that speaks that language near you, I can't recommend enough going to that church to immerse yourself in that language.
yes, because the more you use the language, the more you become fluent.
That is right. It'll motivate you because then you're meeting people and making friends and you want to talk to them, right?
Yes.
And so it'll push you.
Yes. So before we go on, Mr. Dylan, to your next stop, I want to shout out to the people listening to my top 10 countries. I have 75 countries listening to me, and I want to shout
Oh,
out my top 10. Of course, United States at number one, Canada at number two, United Kingdom at number three, Australia at number four, India at number five. Namaste, India. France at number six, Merci beaucoup, and Ecuador at number seven, number eight, Germany, Duncan, Germany, and number nine, Ireland, and number 10, New Zealand. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast because this podcast is empower different countries in the world. Okay, Mr. Dylan, what is our next stop?
okay. So before we left the Persian Gulf and that whole area, the captain decided to do a swim call. So we had anchored off the coast somewhere in the Persian Gulf for everybody who wanted to jump. Well, not jump off the top of the carrier because that's a long fall, but you could be guided down and I think off the fantail, which is the rear, the aft of the ship, and go swimming. Now, here's the
Yes.
thing. They warned us that there are sea snakes in the Persian
Oh.
Gulf. So guess what I did not do? I did not go
Mm.
swimming. I was not about the sea snakes. Now, of course, if you're swimming on the surface, out there in the middle, you're probably okay. But I was still like, nah, I'm not doing
not
that.
not my type. Was that?
So then, when we were done with the swim call, then we swept around the I guess I think of it as a boot. If you're looking at a map, you got Saudi Arabia, you got Oman, UAE, Yemen, all that. It kind of looks like a boot, but facing the other way from Italy, right? Like the boot of Italy faces southwest. What I consider to be kind of the boot of the Arabian Peninsula looks like it's facing northeast. Anyways, I know on
Yes.
a podcast with audio, it's kind of hard to visualize it. But
Yes.
so we circled around that, went through the Gulf of Aden, which has got, Somalia. It's like the Horn of Africa. It points in the same direction as that boot of Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Go through there, go up through the Strait of Bab el Mandeb, which actually, Bab is Arabic for door or gate, in Mandeb means lamentation or suffering. So we went through the door of suffering or sorrow. Because and they call it that because I think there were a lot of shipwrecks in that area, something like that.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So we went through that, and then we go through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb into the Red Sea. Now, the cool memory here is, we're on a carrier, which is massive, right?
Yes.
So you're standing on top of the flight deck. We don't have any jets operating, landing and taking off at this point. We're just sailing down the Red Sea. Going, when I say down, I really mean going north. And you can see Egypt on the left and Saudi Arabia on the right. Well, on the west and east. And
Yes.
when you're standing there looking to either side, you do not see the Red Sea. You only see sand. Because
Yeah.
the ship, it's the contour of the ship is blocking your view of the water.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
like you're crossing through a desert. Except that
Yes.
you see water ahead of you and water behind you, right? So hopefully that helps you visualize it. But that was a really interesting experience for me. And then we went up through the Suez Canal, which is how you get from the Red Sea up into the Mediterranean Sea. Colossus of Rhodes.
Oh,
Right? So
yes.
it's like
Yes.
it's a statue, much like the Statue of Liberty, only its feet were standing on two islands that spanned a good chunk of the harbor.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so now that island is not there anymore. Oh man, I wished it were, because that would have been awesome. We would have definitely gotten a lot of photos of that. But and I'm sure some of us probably would have tried to climb the legs. but
Yes.
but we did sail into the harbor, and the tour guide or whoever it was pointing out, those two islands there, and they were like really, really far apart. And he was like, "That's where we believe the legs were, or the feet." And I was just looking at these two islands and thinking, "There's no way." Because they were really far apart. We were all kind of scratching our heads, like a statue that could span. That's like a mile or two apart. We're like, no way. There's no way they made a statue. I'm thinking they don't know where those two islands really were.
Yes. I think it's a part of Greece, if I'm not mistaken. Rhodes.
Yes. Rhodes is one of the islands of Greece, but this island is closer to mainland Turkey. So if you're looking at an island of Turkey, it would kind of be at the southwest corner of mainland Turkey, but off of the coast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Rhodes was my favorite port as far as being a tourist, because it was gorgeous. And let me tell you, like, the reasons why. All right. So this island, it's very mountainous, and we went up to the top of one of the mountains that overlooked I think it was the northwest or northeast end of the island. And standing at the top of this mountain, you got a vista of the ocean in three directions. You could see it north, you could see it on the east, and you could see it on the west. So you could get some really massive panoramic photos up there. And the thing that stands out in my memory are these trees that flowered with, I think it's pink blossoms. I don't think it was like cherry blossoms like we have in the Washington, D.C. area. But I don't think too far from it. I just remember those beautiful pink blossoms at the time of year that we were there, which I think was in the middle of the summer, if memory serves.
Oh, where the flowers blooming.
Yes, these flowering trees, man, were everywhere. It was just gorgeous. And I also heard from the other sailors that there were topless beaches there. I didn't go to any of those, but the women were very beautiful. I will say that. We went to a local church there. I had been studying a little bit of Greek, not a whole lot, so I could only say the basics, like "Efharisto" for thank you, things like that. And I started studying my Greek after that. I was like, all right, if I ever go back to Greece, I want to really be able to speak it. So,
yes, definitely. You given a chance, which part of places that you want to go back?
I should have known you were going to ask me a really good question. Well, you ask a lot of good questions, Daniel. I got to be prepared for these podcasts, man. Let's see. Oh man, this is like asking somebody which one of your kids is your favorite, Not that these sports are my kids or anything, but shoot. Gosh, It's really hard to say because every one of these ports I really only got 2 or 3 days in, and really I would like to spend more time in all of them. I know that's the cheap way out of answering the question, but maybe Rhodes would be one of them, just because now I know a lot more Greek and I'd love to speak it with them, and I love Mediterranean food. But there's believers back in the UAE I would like to see again. Well, now like the kids are probably grown, but by this time, because that was almost what 18 years ago, 20,
Yes.
19 years ago. But yeah, it really is hard to pick any one place.
We continue next week. Your journey to the world. So let's talk about your books, Mr. Dylan. And what are they?
Okay, so the flagship of my series, if you will, is called Scribe's Descent. So if you go to my website, you will get a free sample of it. My website is dylanwestauthor.com. And I'm sure, Daniel, you'll be providing links to these things for our listeners.
Yes, definitely.
All right. So if you go to dylanwestauthor.com, there is a link at the top called Books, and you will see several of them. You'll see Scribe's Descent. If you click on that link, there is a sample page, the first 4 chapters of the book for free. I wanted everybody to get a really big sampling of my writing style and the story before they, went off to Amazon to buy the actual book. Or if they're local to Hampton Roads, Virginia, they could find me at some local event and buy a signed copy directly from me at my table. So the book Scribe's Descent, it's the first of 5 in a series, the Scribe series. And this takes place in a completely different universe. The first book, just to give you the snapshot view, it takes place on a planet that has never had an earthquake until one day it has a big one. So the military sends a team of explorers down a deep mine to find the cause of the quake. And of course, when they get down there, they find a lot more than that. So that is book 1. And book 2 should be coming out next month, probably late June. So that reminds me, if the listeners want to get regular updates about Scribe's Descent and its following books, then sign up for my newsletter. If you go to dylanwestauthor.com, you can't miss it. There's a big sign up form at the bottom of the page, and there's a link at the top. When you sign up, this is just a monthly newsletter, so you're not going to be flooded with emails, just one a month. And in it, I promise to give you 2 things. One is updates about the books and about the video game. More on that in a minute. But I also give out the geekiest science research tidbits that go into the making of my books. So if you're a science lover like me, you're probably going to want to sign up for this just for the sheer geekiness of the content.
Yes.
So sign up for the newsletter, check out the sample. If you like it, you can buy the book on Amazon. And there's 3 formats. There is paperback, hardcover, and Kindle. I don't have any audio formats at this point. Maybe in a year or 2, I might pony up the money to hire, some company to produce it professionally. And of course, I will be letting you guys know when that happens. But that's a little bit of an investment, so I'm gonna wait a little bit on that one. Yes. But for those listeners who do want to hear it spoken to you, there is a way to do it. If you get the Kindle version and you have an older Kindle with the text-to-speech feature, or if you have a new Kindle with the accessibility options, you can have your device read the book aloud to you. I do that with all my Kindle books. And if you don't have a Kindle and you just open the book in the Kindle app on your laptop or even the Kindle app on a mobile phone, you can use the screen reader built into those devices. So there is a way to listen to the book, even if it's, a little bit of a computerized voice that's doing the talking.
Yes, definitely. If you are interested to listen to our episode with Mr. Dylan West, Book 101 Review, we talk about how he crafted all the books. Right, Mr. Dylan?
Absolutely. We go into a lot more detail about all these books in that podcast. So if you're interested, definitely check out those other episodes. And I believe you'll probably supply links to those too, right, Daniel?
Yes, definitely. So, next week we're gonna continue the journey of Mr. Dylan, that, let's say, one of a kind journey, right?
Well, it is, there are other sailors that do deployments, but they don't usually go the way mine do. I have some interesting little shenanigans that happen. So, yeah.
It's something else.
Oh, yeah.
Something to be proud of because it's bear fruit.
Yes. Yes, indeed. The Lord is good for
Yes,
sure.
definitely. So, Mr. Dylan, catch you next week.
Sounds awesome. I'll be here.
So, Mr. Dylan, thank you for your time.
Oh, well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be on here with you, Daniel.
Yes, and please buy all the books of Mr. Dylan because it's one of a kind.
Oh, and try the game. I forgot to mention on this one.
Oh, yes, please try the game.
Yeah,
Because
so if you go to dylanwestauthor.com, you'll see a video game link. And on that page, there is a link to the demo. It's like a 15-minute demo. And that is what inspired me to write the book. I wrote the book based on that game. You get to try the game for yourself at home in your web browser. All you need is a keyboard and mouse, or better yet, if you have a USB controller, plug that in and have a go.
yes, people, I will provide the link.
Oh, yeah. And if you review Scribes Descent the book on Amazon or other similar platforms, I will put your name into my video game as collectible items. And you're going to see those
Awesome.
names. You'll see those if you play my demo. You will see 13 of them already in there.
Oh, that'd be awesome. So let's play, people. And more to come, people. See you soon.
All
Thank
right.
you,
Bye,
Mr.
guys.
Dylan.